Here's a statement from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Many people don't understand why or how other people become addicted to drugs. They may mistakenly think that those who use drugs lack moral principles or willpower, and that they could stop their drug use simply by choosing to. In reality, drug addiction is a complex disease, and quitting usually takes more than good intentions or a strong will. Drugs change the brain in ways that make quitting hard, even for those who want to. That was for these guys. Now, with that being said, Josh Gordon's story sounds more like an epic mythical adventure, really more so than any other story I've ever done. This dude's been shot, locked up, tried every drug under the sun, robbed houses, and not to mention set an NFL record. How many people on the planet can say that they've done all of those things in one lifetime? Josh Gordon had done it all by the time he was 23. Josh Gordon is one of these guys who's heavily judged, and his issues have often been oversimplified by phrases like stay off the weed. It baffles me that despite all the information out there that's so easy to find, people actually think it's that simple. Josh Gordon is an addict. People in the sports world don't seem to know what that means. Josh Gordon has a long, documented history with marijuana, so people think that his issues would be solved if he simply stayed off the weed. But here's the thing, when an NFL player violates the substance abuse policy, we assume it's weed, and a lot of times it is. But there's tons of other substances that fit under the same description. Josh has been suspended for weed specifically, sure, but he's also been suspended for alcohol, codeine, several times were unspecified, and this last time, Jay Glazer reports specifically that Josh did not test positive for marijuana. So people assume it's just weed, but bro, his problems are way deeper than that. Today we're gonna try to shed a little bit of light on it. This is gonna be a two-part video, in part because Josh's story just demands it. I wanna take my time and do the pre-NFL stuff separate from the NFL and post-NFL stuff. Because once you know just a little bit of the pre-NFL stuff, a statement like stay off the weed just seems ridiculous. Today I'm gonna tell you the story of one of the most talented football players ever born. I really believe that. And much like the guy who may hold the #1 spot on that list, Lawrence Taylor, Josh Gordon could never quite outrun his demons. It's most definitely a sad story. The issue is most people judge without knowing the actual story. Now listen, I obviously was not there, but the story I've most often seen represented in mainstream media doesn't quite match up with the information that is already out there. That's why I felt that I needed to do this video, and well, here it goes. This is what happened to Josh Gordon. Cue the Wayne. Now before we jump in, I gotta give a shout out to one of the major sponsors on this channel, SeatGeek. Now SeatGeek's an app that's built to simplify your ticket buying experience. Whether you're going to the football game, a concert, what have you, they aggregate tickets from all over the internet and put them in one place to help simplify the buying process. They also grade each ticket on a scale from 1 to 100, allowing you to quickly assess the value of each deal. From inside the app, you can preview the view of each seat to get a quick snapshot view of what it's going to look like before you even get to the stadium. If you want to download the app, all you got to do is click the link in the description, and don't forget to use my code FlemLo for $20 off your first purchase. Let's get it. Joshua Caleb Gordon grew up in Houston, Texas, along with his two brothers. During the earliest parts of Josh's childhood, his family was considered middle class. His dad was around and involved in his life early on. Around the time Josh was about 5 or 6, his dad hit a rough patch in his career, and the loss of income all but crippled the family. Likely feeling like he'd failed as a father, Josh's dad just dipped and left his mom to raise the 3 boys. Now there have been rumors and suspicions that Josh's parents also dealt with drug abuse, but as much as Josh openly talks about his childhood, he never really confirms or denies that. So while it would be a fair assumption, it's just that, an assumption. After his dad's departure, Josh, his mom, and his 2 brothers floated around from crappy apartment to crappy apartment, leaving a trail of eviction notices behind him. Stability, that was a thing of the past. Before he was getting suspended from the NFL, Josh Gordon was being expelled from school. He was kicked out from 2 different middle schools for stealing electronics from other students. His marijuana use also started around this time, 7th grade by Josh's account. By 8th grade, he began taking Xanax as well. Now again, while he doesn't go into crazy detail about his home life, Josh has stated on multiple occasions that he had a pretty tumultuous home life. So whatever that environment was, we know it was toxic. This created a quiet, socially awkward, self-aware, anxiety-filled kid. And he fell into drug use early as a way to cope with that. If he'd been able to find a healthy way to cope with this, like counseling or something like that, the rest of this story may not even exist. But unfortunately, he chose drugs. Now, at the beginning of this, I talk about how drug addiction is not a choice. And some people might look at it and say, well, addiction itself may not be a choice, but he chose to go down that path in the first place, before he became addicted. Fair enough. But if you're gonna hold that against them, I want you to weigh the choices of your 7th grade kids, nephews, nieces, or whoever the exact same way. All right, exactly, God damn it. So how bad was his drug use in middle school? Well, here's a first-hand account of one of Josh's earliest drug incidents. I was in middle school, 7th grade. I was in the delivery ramps on the side of the middle school with some friends. I was giving some Xanax, smoking weed like that. In that class, I ended up not passing out, but really just nodding off the Xanax. I was only supposed to take half a bar, but I took the whole bar. So I'm like drooling over the desk. Kids started laughing in the class and the teacher's back was turned, so I just kind of raised my hand and asked to go to the restroom real quick. That was my first experience of a high in 7th grade, and it was to that extent. So I was definitely out of control. Truthfully, that's where it all started for me. The anxiety, the fitting in and stuff, not being comfortable with who I was. Socially, I felt awkward and talking to people or telling them where I was living. Other kids have nicer stuff than you. You're poor, type. A lot of inadequacy. I think that's the reason why I initially got into it. So basically, he was trying to fill a void. Now, if you're young and you're dealing with these things, you have to find an adult that you trust and open up to him, man. Have him get you into treatment early and don't let these issues continue to compound. I'm not an expert at all on none of this, but since we're talking about this in this video, I feel like that's just gotta be said. This is not the way you want to handle this. So Josh essentially started off trying to fill a void, but his drug abuse quickly got out of hand and escalated into something else entirely. Despite being constantly in trouble and getting suspended and expelled and all of that stuff, Josh was still able to secure a scholarship to Westbury Christian School. And for a guy who struggles with drug abuse, private school is probably a terrible place for him to be. Either way, his stay there didn't last too long, because by the time he got to the 10th grade, he got expelled from there too. So by 10th grade, that was the 3rd school he'd already been kicked out of. The reason I say private school is a terrible place if you have like drug issues is because those kids have a lot of resources and a lot of times they got some of the deepest rooted problems. Not a great environment for Josh to be in. But that being said, once he got kicked out and had to go to public school, that offered a whole different set of challenges. After you learn like the basics, how to read, write, add, subtract, divide and multiply, right? Like after you get that, high school is really just kind of learning how to deal with the social situation. Josh's underlying fears and anxiety mixed with his quiet demeanor, social awkwardness, the fact that he came from a tumultuous home life, just all of that stuff mixed together, man, he did not deal very well with the social part of it. So in this part of the story, we see him fall deeper and deeper into the trap. Josh goes back to public school, Lamar High School. So he went from a little private school with like 600 people to this public school with nearly 4,000 people. By the time Josh went back to public school around 2005, 2006, Houston's crime rate had spiked. Now, a lot of people blame this on the evacuees after Hurricane Katrina, but the research shows that they may not entirely be true. Either way, Josh began intertwining himself with gangs as he felt he needed protection. Now keep in mind, we're talking about a guy who struggles from an intense anxiety and fear. Going from private school back to public school, crime rates going up. It makes sense, right? Josh's high school teammates recall him being teased pretty frequently for his living conditions. He lived in a house that looked like it should have been torn down. It looked like it completely did not belong in the neighborhood. But Josh never really said anything about it. he pretty much just bottled it up. His newly found gang affiliation caused him to be involved in several shootouts, and while he says he never hit anybody that he knows of, he himself was hit in the arm during his junior year of high school. It was around this time that he did everything from selling drugs at school to peddling counterfeit cash. He even details this in one of these interviews that he did. He said they'll spend $100 real to get 2,000 counterfeit dollars. Then slowly, day by day, go somewhere like McDonald's to the drive-thru, spend like $100 bill on something off the dollar menu, get real change back, get enough to get some more counterfeit. You see the circle. He stole cars, broke into houses. Through his own admission, he basically said the gang would use him and other new members for any like high risk, low reward capers, basically doing the grunt work, or a pawn if you will. In high school, the Minute Maid drinks that he would sip on during class were probably like 5% juice and 95% vodka. He smoked weed every day, which isn't a huge deal, but then he started to sip lean every night, to help him fall asleep. If you already suffer from anxiety, now you're involved in shootouts and robberies. I mean, I can imagine that must like elevate the level of anxiety that you feel. You ever heard old people say like, if you're scared of something, you must ain't living right? That's because when you're doing things that you know are morally wrong, it messes with you. Here we got a guy who was already abusing drugs, already dealing with anxiety. As you can see, it just keeps stacking up, bro. And as a high school student, he fell deeper and deeper into addiction. Josh got so comfortable with being intoxicated, he started drinking to excess before high school games. I went to school with a few cats like this. I never understood it. I was like, why do you want to be more trash out on the field? What 15, 16-year-old me did not consider was what those dudes must have been dealing with in their home life. What were they trying to cope with? What was they dealing with? What was they running from? I don't know. I never tried to talk to them anything. Back then I judged them, and maybe I could have helped. Who knows? Anyway, their performance suffered dramatically, and they went from some of the most talented cats I knew to a shell of their former self. Josh, I'm sure, also saw a considerable drop off, but he's still Josh Gordon, so he was still a beast. Even with that being said, Josh wasn't able to get the most out of his talent even in high school. When I give you his stat line from his senior year, check this out. Now, Josh was 6'3", like 215, mind you. His senior year, he had 25 receptions for 531 yards. That's in a full high school season. For comparison's sake, this is the same dude who had a 4-game stretch in the National Football League where he had 36 catches for 774 yards, bro. That's 4 NFL games versus a full high school season. Those numbers are usually the other way around, right? So even though he wasn't performing at his peak, Josh still ran the 4x1 and the 4x2 in track and won the state title in both during his senior year of high school. Josh was living a quintessential double life because 5 days after he turned 17, he was arrested on felony credit card theft and spent 35 days in jail. That actually ended up playing heavily into his decision to attend Baylor. See, that arrest came with probation, which wouldn't allow Josh to leave the state of Texas. So as you can see, that helped narrow down the choices artificially. Once Josh got to Baylor, honestly, not much changed with his lifestyle. He didn't realize at first that when he signed that scholarship, he signed up to be randomly drug tested. Something else he had never considered was playing in the NFL. This was obviously never in his plans, seeing as how he never thought he'd live past 18 anyway. We say that so freely and cavalier. I mean, think about the mindset of a person who truly believes they won't live past 18. Think about what they do. Like, think about the chances they take. Despite his accomplishments, Josh still had all the same issues underlying. They had never been addressed. They just been buried away, hidden, like a building with a faulty foundation. You could build that thing up nice and beautiful, and it can have all the potential in the world with what you can do with it, but the foundation is faulty. If you never address that, eventually you're gonna have issues. Josh Gordon's time at Baylor. Crazy stuff. Y'all ready for this? During his first year at Baylor, Josh Gordon was not playing. What he was doing was receiving 6 pounds of weed, vacuum sealed, wrapped in mylar. That's a polyester that makes like a heat resistant plastic. They spray it with kerosene, cover it in coffee beans to match the smell. And Josh would get a shipment like that pretty much every single week. That's according to Josh. Make of that what you will. Through the first 5 games of the season, he put up 327 yards on 14 receptions and scored 4 touchdowns. Then on October 7th, he was arrested for possession of marijuana after he and a teammate fell asleep in a drive-through line at Taco Bell. Amazingly, he was only arrested for possession when they both fell asleep in the drive-through line. Either way, even those charges were magically later dropped. Count your blessings, I guess. Now, his teammate Willie Jefferson, who now plays in the CFL, was kicked off the team completely. And the reason he was kicked off and Josh wasn't was because this was his second offense, and apparently only Josh's first. I find that hard to believe, but it was Josh's first reported offense, so there you go. This was undoubtedly the result of a celebration. Why? Well, the night before the arrest, Josh had his best game of the entire season. Josh had 4 catches for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a 94-yard TD. Again, there's no way to know exactly what transpired that night, but based on watching and reading all of Josh's interviews, he admits that he even celebrated getting out of rehab the first time by getting high. So how do you think he celebrated a great game in college? Exactly. It's really sad because there's no way for him to win with that pattern. If he feels anxiety or something bad happens, he gets high. Then if something good happens, he celebrates by also getting high. So until he could break that pattern, no matter what happens, man. Still, Josh was extremely inconsistent throughout that season, but he managed to make 42 catches for 714 yards and 7 touchdowns, while catching passes from RG3. Now, people were thinking, yo, 2011 come, Josh Gordon, junior year, dude's gonna be a beast. But before that could ever get there, he tested positive yet again for another drug test, and this time, he was kicked off the team indefinitely. This was despite the fact that some members of the Baylor staff was trying their best to help him cheat drug tests. Josh says they would bring him detox drinks and even went as far as to show him exactly how to use it. Despite all of that, there was still schools lining up for Josh Gordon's services, trying to get him to transfer into their school. USC, UCLA, Oregon, just to name a few. So Josh decided, yeah, cool, I still want to play football, so I'm just gonna drive west, go on a few visits, and decide what school I'm gonna go to. So he's driving west. He's smoking the whole way there, popping Adderall to stay awake. Now, he gotten an offer from Utah, and when he got close to the school, he had basically gotten tired against the drugs that weren't off, and he decided, you know what, I'll just go here. Like, that's how he picked his next school. Stay off the weed, huh? It's so far beyond that. Unfortunately, now he was expected to sit out a year, during which time he took Adderall every day and tried cocaine for the first time. Obviously, he failed his very next drug test and got sent home. It was during this time that Josh learned about the NFL supplemental draft. And like a lot of other things in his life, he just kind of stumbled into it. Here's a direct quote. I figured, I'll find out if I have what it takes to play in the NFL. Give that shit a shot. And you can look forward to the tumultuous career that statement spawned in part 2 of this video. This was a small synopsis of Josh Gordon's early childhood through college. Now tell me something. If a middle school kid makes a terrible choice and goes down a rabbit hole of drug use, becomes addicted due to feelings of inadequacy and a poor home life, plans on dying, but his body miraculously adapts and figures out a way to function despite what he's doing to it, and then he magically finds himself in the NFL. Does it seem logical to you, after hearing all of this stuff that started way back in middle school, that a person can say, okay, I'm done with this? Change a behavior that you built up over the course of years is unbelievably difficult. It's people who can't stop eating food that's horrible for them because they grew up eating it, or somebody that they love used to buy that for them, so they associate the feelings they just can't get off this food. They go on their little diet, 3 weeks, boom, binge eat. That's just a certain kind of food. Like, it's not that you gotta starve, it's just don't eat this type of food. People can't do it. That's just regular everyday stuff, not brain altering chemicals. Well, some of it might be, I don't know what's in this damn food, but you get my point. We logically know that addiction is a struggle for tons of people, so we gotta stop pretending like it's supposed to be easier just because somebody is a professional athlete. That doesn't make any sense. Tune in next week for What Happened to Josh Gordon Part 2, as we dive into possibly the most toxic wide receiver quarterback combination ever.
Yeah, I'm no quitter, I'ma go get her.